Chris Manning from Locked On Cavs here, joined as always by my co-host Evan Damerl. Evan, what's up, buddy?
Not a whole lot, man. Good. It's Victory Sunday, heading into Victory Monday on WKYC with the sloppy Browns win over the Eagles. But you know what? I'll take it, man. How are you?
I'm doing good. Obviously, a rain sloggy kind of game, but you know, if a win to win 7-3 is pretty freaking good if you're the Cleveland Browns, considering their history since they've come back. And obviously, if you want more on that, Locked On Browns with Jeff Lloyd, as you covered, and Ben Axelrod and Tyler Carey have all their great stuff at WKYC/sports. They're excellent, buddy. For tuning into us for the first time, this is the Locked On Cavs podcast, a daily look at the Cleveland Cavaliers. Evan and I co-run For the Sword, SB Nation's Cavs site together, in addition to this podcast. But Evan, free agency is here. We obviously talked about the draft last week. You can go check that out in our feed or in video form here in WKYC as well. The Cavs overall didn't really do much of note. We'll get into some of that and why it's sort of okay and everything going forward. But the big news, obviously, is that Tristan Thompson, the longtime Cav, the longest tenured Cav up until this point, the number 4 overall pick in the 2011 draft, the champion, the locker room leader, all that stuff, has signed a 2-year deal with the Boston Celtics for the full mid-level exception. He's going to go from Cleveland to Boston, go play on a playoff contender. I think it's a really great signing for the Celtics. I will actually be on Locked On Celtics either Monday or Tuesday talking about that with John Corrales. So go check out that if you want to hear me explain why Tristan is a GOAT. But Evan, this isn't surprising. You and I were kind of sure that this was going to happen. But what? Let's just say this: what are the Cavs losing in not bringing back Tristan Thompson?
More than I wrote about this at Forbes. We were talking about this before we went live. I was helping my girlfriend with a few things yesterday when the news broke, and I said, I'm not going to touch this right now. I'm spending quality time with someone. But as soon as I got home, I cracked open my laptop and got to work. And on the court production, Tristan was arguably the second or third best player, depending on how you feel about Kevin Love and Colin Sexton. And it's not only that, but it's just a cultural thing, and more so his presence in the locker room. Chris, I really like the line you always say, like, you can never have too many adults in the room when it comes to a young team like Cleveland. Tristan was one of those adults. He was given an option many times where the Cavs were like, hey, do you want to go or do you want to stay? And Tristan more didn't thumb his nose at the rebuild like Kevin Love did, but he actively embraced it. And he took a lot of these young players under his wing, mostly Sexton and Garland and Porter, and Windler to an extent when he was healthy too. But like, Tristan was taught a lot, like when LeBron first came back, when LeBron tried to take Kyrie and Dion under his wing, and Kyrie and Dion both thumbed their nose at LeBron. Tristan instead listened to it, and he learned how to take care of his body and how to maximize every single practice and every opportunity you have in workouts, and how to be a leader on the court and off the court. And Tristan instilled a lot of that, and now the Cavs view Colin Sexton as his cultural successor, spiritual successor, if you want to call it that. And it's gonna be a void to replace Tristan for sure. I don't think he's really replaceable. He's an all-time great with the Cavs, and like Larry Nance told Chris Fedor of Cleveland.com last night, 13 should definitely hang in the rafters when Tristan's all done with his career.
Yeah, the vibe I got from talking to a couple people in terms of the player side is I think it's going to be felt. I think his leadership was unquestionably the leader in the locker room last year. I think Kevin obviously carries a lot of cachet. I think Larry can carry some cachet. I think if Delly is back on this team, and we'll see if that happens or not, I think he's a guy whose voice will matter. And obviously you have other guys who have been around, like Andre Drummond. Obviously he's been in the NBA for a long time and has a track record of making All-Star games and stuff. But Tristan's singular voice, I think, is something he earned over time. He developed it by being a winning player, by being a guy that really contributed at the absolute highest level. And that's not replaceable. That just kind of isn't. And I understand if you're looking at the Cavs 5 years out, which I would argue is a lot of the way the Cavs should do business, should be looking a couple years out here. They're just not at that point where they're quote unquote ready to be good yet. Tristan's probably not going to be a key part of your team in 5 years. He's 29 years old, 30 years old. He obviously had a really he's 28 right now, excuse me. He had a downturn kind of after the title where he looked a little cooked for a little bit there, but then he's really come back strong the last couple of years. Had a couple slight injury issues, but nothing severe, but has been very productive since. And I think he's really going to help Boston. His numbers last year, 30 minutes a game, which was the highest of his career since the 2013-14 season, age 22. That's in itself kind of remarkable. 12 points a game, 10 rebounds a game, shot about 52% on 2-point attempts, and obviously hit a couple of threes for the first time in his career. Just overall, like one of his better seasons. I think in a lot of ways, one of the he might have. Yeah, he did the pace
for Ben Simmons.
Yeah,
in Philly,
very clutch of all things. But obviously, just a very integral part of the Cavs, and I don't think he's replaceable. I think even if I think one of the things that we'll see this year is like Tristan wasn't always like super vocal, like very vocal on the court in a way that Colin has the work ethic that I think translates to that. But I think with with Tristan on court, pointing out where guys are going to be rotation wise, keeping things organized, talking to guys on the bench, talking in the locker room after games, being the guy that is like the connective tissue to kind of keep everything on the right page. If you go back and look at all of his scrums, he's kind of hammering home the points to us as well, because he knows those things are going to get out there. They're going to reverberate. Colin has like the work ethic, but it is not like his DNA to be this like very outspoken leader type. He may grow into that, but it's just not what he is yet, nor does he have the cachet I think that Larry does, or that Tristan does right now. But Larry, I think it's up to Larry, it's up to Kevin, it's up to Colin, it's up to those guys to, I think, try to fill that void, and we'll see what happens there. But I think that's kind of irreplaceable, and it's an interesting roster building question with Tristan, because I think there's a world where you don't acquire Andre Drummond and you bring him back for maybe a little more than what Boston did. Just give him that hometown bump, give him a little bit of money, extra money. You would have the flexibility to do it, and use him to keep developing your culture, keep developing a young big who can come in and learn a lot from him, and then maybe he goes and ring chases after that. They're obviously not doing that. Drummond is, I think, in theory, in a vacuum, like a better player. I think obviously he has a higher ceiling as a player in a lot of ways, but part of me wonders what you're losing in making a town thing. I don't think we know yet. Maybe it's not really a big deal for the next season, but I do think it's an interesting decision point for Kobe Altman to go with Drummond, the higher talent level and the higher contract, versus what Tristan would have offered you. I don't think necessarily one is 100% right, 100% wrong, but I think it's a notable decision.
No, it is for sure. And I do think about it now, because I remember when Joe Varden reported back around the trade deadline, Tristan Thompson made it clear to the Cavs that his intentions were that he wanted out, and he wanted to be traded to a contender. And maybe we kind of knew the writing was on the wall, even though Tristan said he wanted to be back, and Kobe Altman shared with the media during the bubble mini camp that he wanted to be back. And by all accounts, everybody on the team, Larry Nance, Kevin Love included, wanted Tristan to be back. And maybe we kind of just knew this whole time this was inevitable, but it's understandable. I mean, like you said, maybe the Cavs want to take a higher risk, or not a higher risk, but take a more chance on Andre Drummond and his possible upside. And also just, it's weird to think, because I remember even the beginning of last year, like center was a position the Cavs did not need to address, because at the time they had Thompson, they had Zizic, they had Henson. I mean, Larry Nance was still a 5 before we discovered he was a 3. Kevin Love was playing a little bit of 5 too. Center is now going to be a position of need for Cleveland going forward. And I know we're going to talk about this more in the next segment, but looking ahead to the draft, like Evan Mobley, the USC big man, is an option as well. Love the name, by the way. Evan's such an underrated name in my opinion. But no, it's just definitely going to be interesting what Cleveland does at the 5 this year. I know Andre Drummond is going to be the mainstay there, but like you and I both know, and we've heard, Kevin Love's bulked up and he's put on muscle to help him play that. And Larry has tweeted, I think he deleted the tweet, I tried finding it last night, but that he's probably going to play more 5 as well, even though he doesn't want to. But it'll be interesting to see what the Cavs do going forward. And I know people are really anxiously wringing their hands about free agency. So maybe that's just what the Cavs need to do at this point, and we'll maybe get a little bit more clarity in the coming days what they're going to do.
Yeah, I think it'll be clear, but again, I do think it's obviously not. It's entirely possible maybe that Drummond works out in a way that you and I don't think it's on the trajectory to do so right now, and maybe he becomes the answer there to some degree for the next couple of years, and you could get look at a center, like one of the various good wings in next year's draft, the Kid Cunningham, Jalen Green, Jonathan Kuminga, etc. But you're obviously in this position right now where it is kind of, you're wondering what the position looks like. Evan, before we go into the next segment, I want to ask this: with the Cavs' big situation as of now is Kevin Love, Larry Nance, Andre Drummond is kind of your quote unquote your big 3, your leading 3 guys for 4 and 5 minutes at the 4 and 5.
Dean Wade as well.
Well, Dean Wade is there, and then Jordan Bell is also there. So those would be your 4th and 5th options. Those are your backups. I think Bell is more of a 5. Wade is more of a 4, who maybe needs to play some small ball 5 at the best version of himself if he can bulk up and play small in space a little bit. in your mind, based on who's out there and stuff, I mean, do you think there is is getting a more veteran presence, a more shot blocking presence, let's say, something you would go out of your way to try to do if you're Cleveland?
Not right now. You
Okay.
can't wait to see how things shake out in the coming weeks. Maybe there's a body you can attract, but you maybe see what you have at Jordan Bell. Jordan Bell didn't look as great as he did when everyone was like, how did Golden State, or how did the league like Golden State get away with this kind of situation?
Yeah.
I'm a believer. Jordan Bell fits into the team's timeline. He's a small ball 5, which the Cavs have a lot of players on their team where they have the ability to go small, or they could go big too, and Jordan Bell can maybe fit into that wrinkle as well. But I think a lot of weight's going to fall on Jordan Bell's shoulders as the backup 5 in these situations, and I think JB Bickerstaff being a bit of a tinker with Cleveland's rotations to begin with is going to help a lot. But yeah, no, I think this is going to be a wait and see approach. Maybe there's a player that becomes available by trade. Yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. Like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe hit up Detroit. They have a glut of big men right now.
They have 14 big men and Killian Hayes on their roster basically as of right now. But Zaire Smith and Killian Hayes and 13 bigs. All right,
Tony
we're gonna
Bradley,
take.
who I was scrambling about, by the way. Philadelphia just traded for him today, but if he's available, maybe he's 22 years old and he's 7 foot and he's a defensive-ish big man. He played mostly with the G League in Utah, but he's been cooking in Utah's system, and Utah's really good at developing big men. That's somebody the Cavs could maybe take a flyer on if he's available.
For sure. All right, let's take a quick break here, but first want to tell you all about Built Bar. Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar ever. They have 6 new amazing flavors out right now, including caramel brownie, cookies and cream, cherry barcia, lemon almond cheesecake, carrot cake, and apple almond crisp. I myself love the cookies and cream and love the cherry barcia. Built Bars are healthy. They're great for the health conscious guy. They help you lose or maintain weight while indulging in a delicious treat. Low calorie, low sugar, high protein, high fiber. Great for a keto diet. And if you want to look at the flavor profiles, let's take a look at cherry barcia for instance. 17 grams of protein, 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 grams of net carbs. That's A+ protein bar right there, and it actually tastes good. It's not going to be chalky. It's not going to be hard and uncomfortable to eat. You're actually going to enjoy eating a Built Bar. Right now, you can get a free cooler with purchase while supplies last, and you can go to BuiltBar.com and use promo code LOCKEDON, and you get 20% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDON for 20% off at BuiltBar.com. That'll let them know that we sent you. And again, I highly recommend cookies and cream and cherry barcia. I also want to let you guys know that coming up tomorrow on Locked On Cavs, Bill DiFilippo from Uprocks and Dime Mag will be on Locked On Cavs talking about Lamar Stevens, the Penn State wing the Cavs have signed, and talking about what the Cavs are going to be doing later in the year in terms of how they're going to look, how they compare to some of the other bad teams in the NBA. And then on Wednesday, Evan and I here on Locked On Cavs are going to be talking about if the Cavs can make the play-in tournament this upcoming season. So look forward for that later in the week on Locked On Cavs. We'll be right back. Evan had a great homage to Tristan Thompson there, and we'll be back with more in here in a second. All right, Evan.
Dynamite.
Yes. All right, back in for this. All right, back here on Locked On Cavs. I'm Chris Manning. He's Evan Demerol. Evan, let's talk about free agency. The Cavs didn't do anything. They are maybe the only team that hasn't signed anyone.
They just signed with someone today.
Okay, but I'm talking about actual free agency. They have not signed a veteran minimum. They're signing guys on the edge of the roster. They drafted Isaac Okoro, and then they've drafted some guys that are going to compete for the team, and then probably end up in Canton if and when the Canton Charge have a season. We'll see if that happens or not. But they have not, added, I think, someone that I would expect to make the roster. Let's say they didn't sign Harry Giles. They didn't sign Willie Hernan-Gomez. They didn't sign Torrey Craig. There's a variety of guys that we talked about on this show at different points, that any other guys that were linked to, Derek Jones Jr., Pat Connaughton, that they were linked to, they didn't sign those guys. I actually think that's okay. I think it's fine. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I was checking up on our man Willie, but I didn't really see any news on him. But
I believe he signed with someone today in a minimum.
I think
I will, while you're talking, I will look this up because unless I hallucinated it. Signed with the Pelicans. Signed with David Griffin.
Oh, never mind. The other Hernan Gomez signed the Wolves today. So yeah, no, the Cavs really weren't expected to be major players in free agency. Yeah, they do have a mid-level exception to play around with, but this is something I've been kind of stressing, and I know friend of our rival pod, Chicago Rodriguez of the Chase Town, kind of like giggled at the fact that I said, look, the Cavs have too many mouths to feed right now, and too many players to play right now to sign someone with that mid-level exception. And like, that's something I've been stressing. Like, is this a player that can make a meaningful contribution to Cleveland's roster to bump out either a young player or make JB Bickerstaff give less minutes to his players? And a lot of these players made sense. Like, I know Cavs fans had their heart set on Nerlens Noel. They had their heart set on Alfred Payton, Harry Giles, Derek Jones Jr. The list goes on. But I do know the Cavs were in conversations with a lot of these players. They were. I'm not saying Cleveland's not doing anything. It's just there's a lot, maybe just better opportunities out there. Like in the case of Giles, like he lines up perfectly with the Cavs are trying to build. He's a young, athletic big man who could really turn into a defensive stud, a two-way stud for them. And it just Portland presented a better opportunity for him, and Portland has a good player development staff, and it's also easier to be a big man and play with two guards that know how to move the rock, and Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum. And Colin Sexton and Darius Garland could do that in theory, but they can't right now. So why don't you just go to the easier opportunity, maybe have a big playoff moment or a couple big games, and then you cash in on the opportunity somewhere down the line? That makes more sense for me if in a practical business sense. Does it suck as someone who covers this team to see the Cavs really aren't making any like major moves? Yeah, it does. It doesn't give me a lot to talk about. Does it suck to see one of the best players in franchise history walk away and the Cavs weren't willing to match that offer in Tristan Thompson? Yeah, it does. But I also understand what Cleveland's trying to do. They have a lot of mouths to feed right now, and I think they're going to be like edge signings like you talked about. Like, I think Matthew Dellavedova is going to be one of the bigger names the Cavs bring in through free agency, and maybe they bring in a couple guys for training camp deals that they kick the tires on. But yeah, no, the market's drying up pretty fast for big men now, and I know that's going to be a big pressing thing. Like, just full disclosure, I don't think John Hadson's signing with the Cavs either.
No, I don't either. I get the logic of it. I get the logic of it, but the let's just say the tenure of him in Cleveland wasn't like the most fruitful. Like maybe JB could fix it. JB Bickerstaff could fix that, but I don't think the vibes with John and the organization as a whole are great.
No, they're not. And also, I think John is at the point in his career where he could play meaningful minutes for a team that could use a backup center who can stretch the floor a little bit and make a couple plays and play good, solid defense. Like, he makes sense on a lot of contending teams. It would not surprise me if he ends up somewhere in like Milwaukee on a vet min deal, especially if they think Bobby Portis is more of a 4 than a 5. So I'm officially going to be a buzzkill here and say that the John Henson to Cleveland dream needs to die, because you don't need to get your hopes up and have your expectations crushed when he doesn't sign with Cleveland.
Is there any remaining free agent that you would be most interested in?
Yeah, that's such a tough question.
I can tell you one I would not be interested in.
Tell me who you're not interested in while I ponder your question.
DeMarcus Cousins. I would not be interested in that if I'm the Cavs.
Oh, God. Well, they already tried that once with Andrew Bynum. Why would they do that again?
Well, and if there's one guy that I would be interested in that seems possibly realistic, but maybe not, it's Aaron Baines, because I do think just like having a guy who can who screens really well like that and could like be your actual monster second big man guy behind Drummond and like could start if you do flip Drummond at the deadline. They could start the rest of the year. You could flip him. I would be okay with that depending on the price. I'm not saying like throw them MLE at him, but for like a couple $1 million, like whatever. Like you like what else are you gonna do with that money?
If you're Aaron Baines,
no, I'm not saying he would want to do it.
No, I'm saying he probably wouldn't come to Cleveland because
he'll go to Phoenix, or he'll go to like the
Toronto.
Yeah, go to Toronto, go to the Lakers if like Marc Gasol goes back to Toronto. Like maybe Dwayne Dedmon comes into this conversation. Chris Boucher would be kind of maybe more of the speed that we're talking about here.
Chris Bobby Boucher, I also don't think it'd be available because if I were him, I'd just go back to Toronto if I had to pick.
I don't think I think the vibe is that he's not going back. He got a qualifying offer, but we'll see what's going there. I don't know. I'm just saying, like, it's not a rush, but there's a couple guys I still sort of like, but like not obviously in a rush to like pay any of these guys.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure.
Okay. All right, let's take one more break here. Come back. We'll talk about what I think Evan will dive into some of the other deals that have been signed and what that can mean for the Cavs as they potentially have to sign players to extensions going forward. That's coming up right after. Yes. All right. Evan Dammerel, Chris Manning here.
Got to tease one thing real quick, so I'll cut this.
Hit me. Yeah.
Hey everyone, listen to Locked On NBA on Mondays. Josh Lloyd, host of our wildly popular Locked On Fantasy Basketball, takes you around the NBA's major headlines with the help of our local experts. Subscribe to Locked On NBA Podcast today, wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Chris Manning and I are back with more Locked On Cavs. I'm taking the reins of the situation. Chris, I got my floaties on. I'm ready to do some diving in the pool of free agency. What move has surprised you surprised or taken you aback? Like, oh, did they really do that kind of thing?
I think if the Hornets do ultimately have to stretch Batum, that's a little like that's galaxy brain shit to me.
Did you see what Batum said? Like, I felt really bad.
No, and this isn't like an indictment of Nick Batum, but it's like if you're the Hornets, that's just like you could have dumped him to the Cavs for like Drummond at least
picked or like a Miles Bridges to him, and they would have made it work. And yeah, they could have traded for Drummond, and they would have addressed their big man problem too.
Yeah, I'd rather I'd probably, if I was them, rather have Drummond than like Whiteside, and they were known to be linked to like Drummond ahead of the deadline last year, and had been looking at trying to waste a trade for him before. So I don't know. That's probably the one. I don't know. I'm trying to think if there's I think the Marcus Morris thing is also a big overpay.
You think? How much did he get?
64.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Over 4 years. That's a lot of money for Marcus
Morris.
That's probably the only ones that I've been like, and then obviously the whatever's going on with the Bucks is just like.
Well, Milwaukee, I was critical of them Saturday morning. I will talk about who I think has had the best offseason. It's a pretty obvious answer, but I think Milwaukee, I was critical of Saturday morning, but they went in and kind of addressed some of the issues. Like they brought in the Bogdanovich thing is really blown up in their face. And like Atlanta, let's talk about them actually for a second. They're going to be stupid fun offensively this year. Like Trae Young, Bogdanovich, you have Clint Capella, you have John Collins, you have so many fun players offensively. They're going to be putrid defensively. And like Rondo's going to be fun off the bench for them too. But like, it's going to be an interesting year in the NBA, at least in the Eastern Conference. And with Atlanta getting better, I think it really bumps down Cleveland's chances of making the playoffs as well. But no, I was really critical of what Milwaukee was doing, but they brought in Torrey Craig, who you really like, Chris. They brought in Bryn Forbes, who I really like from who used to be a San Antonio. Like, I think those were two really good additions. I think I didn't look at the numbers of the Bobby Portis contract, but Bobby Portis could have been an overpay. But Bobby Portis is also a good, like, high energy big man off the bench, and that addresses the loss of Robin Lopez. Like, Milwaukee got younger, they got faster, they got stronger. I think they just need to address shooting a little bit more. And
the cap mechanics, I think, are just the whole Connaughton thing where they had to like go back and like kind of renegotiate to like figure it's just like that's like just kind of dumb, some shenanigans there. And they obviously did not benefit from whoever reported them for tampering.
Would you rather have Pat Connaughton on the Cavs, or would you rather have him in Milwaukee restructure his contract?
He was one of those guys where I did not understand why they thought he would fit. So good.
Yeah, we talked about him and Obi Toppin. Those are two players we talked about in depth. Actually, over text to the front of the pod, Jeff Nam and I were like, people who cover this team for some reason keep linking Pat Connaughton and Obi Toppin when realistically and stylistically it makes zero sense for the Cavs.
Yeah, Connaughton like doesn't really shoot well. So like why like Cavs need people who can shoot well based on what they have and don't whatever. Anyway, is there any the Lakers if they especially get Marcus Gasol? If the Lakers get Marcus Gasol,
it's over.
Yeah. And obviously, like, I think the other teams that win are the teams that got their star young players to sign extensions. So obviously the Boston Celtics got Jason Tatum. And I think notably for the Cavs and for Colin Sexton, I think Sacramento getting De'Aaron Fox, and I think the Utah Jazz getting Donovan Mitchell to sign these massive extensions is a win. And here's the thing. I do not feel like we know what Colin is going to get yet. It is not. Some of the underlying numbers obviously are good, and there's some comps you can make between him and those guys and whatever. He's not at their level. He's not. Fox obviously hasn't won yet either, but Fox has been better. He's more efficient, better creator, all that stuff. Mitchell obviously has had some really big moments in his career already, even though he's just starting out. But maybe Colin ends up getting like less than them. Like maybe he's not getting that amount of money, and I think I would be surprised if he did get that amount of money based on where he's at now and what his trajectory might be. But I would also be, if I'm his camp, that is what you're negotiating off of. That is like the start of what you're negotiating off of. And you're saying, look at these young guys that are hyped up by the organization, just like Colin has been hyped up by you. We deserve this. And there's probably a middle ground to meet. And maybe he has a monster year and deserves that amount of money, but they're already a year away from that. And I think I think for the Cavs, that's what one of the things you have to look at this summer is like, this is the going rate for these guys. And that contract negotiation is going to be absolutely fascinating to make a year from now. Less than a year from now.
Colin Sexton is a very good player, but I do wonder if he is a good player taking advantage of playing on a very bad team where he's putting up these gaudy stats like he has, but efficiency wise, like he is, there's not more efficient scorer at his age. I mean, he's more efficient than Jamal Murray was at his age. So another friend of the pod and rival Chase Down host, Justin Rowan, pointed out that maybe it's not De'Aaron Fox's contract. You look at Jamal Murray's contract for Colin. But even then, I don't know if I feel 100% comfortable paying Colin Sexton that kind of money because we don't know what he's going to be long term. And also, if you look at the Cavs, they might lowball Colin a lot too because they were not apt to pay Tristan Thompson the type of money Boston was paying him allegedly. And
those are a little different situations, but yeah, I get it.
I know, but it's just kind of feels like Cleveland, ever since they signed Kevin Love to that mammoth extension, they've been like hoarding money in their coffers instead of willing to pay it. And like also at the same time, you and I are in agreement like what the point of having cap space, but I feel like, and also Cleveland has a disadvantage of being a small market team. Like you look at Sacramento with the Bogdanovich situation, like he signed a pretty lucrative offer sheet from Atlanta, and either Sacramento offers it and they're going to be stuck with this player who probably doesn't deserve this much money, or they let him walk and they lose a player who is talented and beneficial to their roster. So I think Cleveland's going to be kind of facing that situation too, where Colin is aware of the fact that Cleveland's a small market. They don't really demand free agents, period, unless it's like a player that's desperate to rehab their game or something because they're taking advantage of a bad situation. It's definitely interesting to see what's going to happen with Colin, but I think the Cavs will lock him up because I know the franchise really, really likes him, and I don't know. I do. Yeah, the conversation is going to be really fascinating. The discussions, like the little nuggets that leak out of those discussions, will be fascinating to break down, and I'm just kind of interested to see what happens next.
Yeah, if you look at some of the advanced numbers on this, like I think that's where the case falls a little bit down for Sexton. Like he comes in below these guys. Like was like a little above average in terms of value replacement. These guys in their second NBA seasons are like much better than that. And obviously circumstances matter, but there are some things about his game that, you know, we need to see what they look like in year 3 to kind of evaluate what his contract is going to look like. And I think too, any second contract is bet on. Like if you're Boston, you're betting that Jason Tatum is going to continue to ascend. If you're the Jazz, you're betting that Donovan Mitchell is going to continue to go up. If you're the Kings, you're betting that De'Aaron Fox, and then you retool the roster with Tyrese Halliburton and other stuff, and maybe Marvin Bagley finally can put it together and stay healthy. He helps you go to another level. If you're the Cavs, whatever you pay Colin Sexton is a bet on future production as much as it is rewarding the guy now. And I just think, as of now, as we look at this, that is going to be the thing where we're just learning more and more about this in the next year. This is a big year for a lot of Cavs players. Colin Sexton is going to set the parameters of his contract this year. Of his second contract, a lot of that is going to be dictated this season, and maybe you get to run up to restricted free agency and all that stuff. But I think you're looking at him being able to ask for a certain amount of money starting based on what he does in year 3. And it's not going to be something he talks about, or I think he totally gets weighed down by. That's just not the vibe you ever get about him. But it's a thing that exists already, and I think that's probably, to me, almost the most notable thing about this free agency period is that the parameters of what Colin maybe could ask for at the absolute highest level is starting to take shape a little bit.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Evan, any final thoughts as we get out of here?
No, not really. I am intrigued by the Cavs adding Charles Matthews to their roster. He tore his ACL in a workout during the pre-draft process last year with the Boston Celtics. So he's been a year removed from basketball. Was a big-bodied perimeter defender, which is again refreshing. The Cavs are targeting defensive-minded players, but he could not shoot the three at all. The same thing could be said from the kid from Penn State they added, whose name escapes me, and who we're having someone on this week to talk about. So the Cavs are targeting defensive-minded players, but maybe they aren't the best three-point shooters, so maybe they really do believe in their ability to remedy shots. Isaac Okoro included. Did you see the picture I tweeted of him, by the way?
Looking huge.
Jacked.
Yes. Looking big. Yeah, I agree. And I would also just say I think Memphis had a really good offseason.
Yeah, you would say that because you're a nerd, so I get that.
Look, Melton's a good contract. Contra's a good contract. And Jonte Porter, it was like Trevor Magnotti, our friend's #1 prospect in that draft class before his knees just imploded. So if you get him for $2 million a year and you get to see if he's anything, like that's like nothing in NBA money.
That's true.
That's like really not a whole lot of money in NBA money. So, all right.
No, absolutely.
That is going to do it here. We'll be back. If anything does big happen, this is what I'll say. We have our shows laid out for the week. It's obviously Thanksgiving, so we won't be posting later in the week unless something crazy happens, which I'm just tempting fate with this. So maybe the Cavs are going to like do something here, announce an extension for Drummond or something wacko. But we have our shows for the week. We'll see if anything changes. I don't expect any seismic Cavs news as of now. But if so, we'll be back and we'll dive into that. But again, tomorrow, Bill DiFilippo is coming on from Dime. And then Wednesday, we're going to talk about can the Cavs make the play-in tournament, which is going to be hard, but we're going to dive in through it from all angles. But for myself, for Evan, this has been Locked On Cavs. Find us on Twitter at Locked On Cavs. I'm on Twitter at CWM Evan is on Twitter at @Evan. If you're watching us on video,
it's right down there.
Right there. I'm really bad at this. That's going to be it. Talk to y'all soon.
He's over there. Yeah, talk to you soon, guys.